dependable and stable is the benefit. If it's a short-term benefit, it is easy to, of course, say, it's a short-term benefit that we cannot hold on to, and people cannot say this is very helpful. It's going to just stay until for this time and things like that. But again, so people will say we're looking for all forms of solutions to resolve our crisis here in the country. And talking about that, so Statistics South Africa said that the country's official unemployment rate has decreased 2.3% compared to the previous quarter, with the latest number now at 32.6%, announced by the Statistician General earlier today. The quarterly labor force survey, and that is the period of the 1st April to the end of June 2023, says the number of employed people in the country currently stands at 16.3 million, which is almost at the pre-COVID levels where the figure stood at 16.4 million. So that's what we're looking at here. Let me bring in Statistics South Africa to talk us through these stats that we are seeing now and also help us make sense of it. We're speaking to the Labour States Director there at Statistics South Africa, Desiree Manamela. Good evening and welcome.
Good evening, sir. Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you very much for joining us. What are the takeaways? What are the highlights of the unemployment stats? Obviously, chief among those is the fact that there's been a 0.3% decrease.
Yes, you're right. I mean, during the second quarter of 2022, we saw a decline in unemployment by 11,000 to 7.9 million. And we also saw employment increasing by 154,000 to 16.3 million, which is a figure which is almost to the figure that we saw pre-COVID. Now, these numbers, they're telling us that, unemployment rate then declined by 0.3 of a percentage point to 32.9% in the first quarter. And in the second quarter, it declined by 0.3 of a percentage point to 32.6%. So we also see the expanded unemployment rate, which includes the discouraged work seekers, as well as those other people that mentioned that they did not look for work for other reasons other than discouragement. It also declined by 0.3 of a percentage point to 42.1% in the second quarter. Now, if we look at this increase in employment by different sectors, the informal sector indicated a decrease of 33,000 jobs in the same period, while the formal sector employment increased by 143,000. And going into different industries, we see industries like construction creating about 104,000 jobs during the same quarter. Trade also creating some employment there, and community and social services as well. But even though we saw these increases, we have also noticed that there were some declines in the industries of manufacturing, finance, transport, and utilities. Okay.
Now, in terms, and I'll come back to the industries that contributed, but just that issue on discouraged work seekers. What are the stats saying there? And perhaps explain that to us. What do we mean by discouraged work seekers?
Yes. What happens is for those people that mentioned that they were not in employment or they did not even look for a job, that is the unemployed population. We have a residual of the not economically active population. These are the people that did not look for work because of reasons like discouragement, or they are full-time students, or they did not look because of illness or disability. Now, in terms of the discouraged work seekers, these are the people that did not look for work. They are available, though, to take up a job if a job is offered to them. But because of reasons like they lost hope in terms of looking for employment, and the reasons of the skills that they have is not required, or they think that the skills that they have is not required in the kind of work they have in their area where they live. So they are basically people who have lost hope of finding employment, and that's what we call discouraged work seekers. However, if the job is offered to them, they are open to take up that kind of employment.
Now, in terms of, and it's an area you would have touched on a bit earlier, just to go back to that issue of the expanded definition of unemployment. What are we talking about there, and how is that determined?
Yes, expanded unemployment, we are looking at we are taking the whole total unemployment. We include the discouraged work seekers, as well as those people that did not look for work, but they were available to take up a job, but they did not look for jobs because of other reasons other than discouragement. Maybe they did not have transport to go and look for a job, or they are too young, or they are too old. But if you ask them if they are available, they are available to take up a job. Now, when you compare the expanded definition of employment with the official, we see that in the second quarter of 2023, the official unemployment was standing at 7.9 million, while the expanded unemployment is standing at 11.9 million, which resulted in 42.1% unemployment rate when we use the expanded definition.
Okay, and in terms of provinces, if you're able to break it into provinces, how has provinces such as Gauteng, Limpopo, and Mpumalanga done?
Yes, in terms of provinces, we see provinces like Limpopo, Western Cape, and KwaZulu-Natal. They created most of the jobs that were realized in the second quarter of 2023. We see Limpopo creating about 80,000 jobs, Western Cape creating 54,000 jobs, and KwaZulu-Natal creating about 48,000 jobs in the same quarter that we are discussing now. However, we see provinces like the Free State losing about 59,000 jobs, and Northern Cape also lost about 17,000 jobs.
And just to come back, and overall, are the same contributors in every province in terms of the contribution to the figure?
I think what you mean is the industries that created employment the same across different provinces. Yeah?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
If we look at different provinces, we see, like, for example, Limpopo, the main contributors to the increase in Limpopo employment were agriculture, mining, manufacturing, construction. We saw a lot of increases in terms of employment in those industries within Limpopo. And also within community and social services in the private household, we saw increases of about 12,000 and 10,000 respectively. And when we look at the province like the Western Cape created about 54,000 jobs in total. Now, if we look at which industries created those employment, we're looking at transport, we're looking at construction, which created most of the jobs in the Western Cape, and we also see community and social services as well as private households creating most of the jobs. However, even though we see this increase in employment, we've also realized some declines in terms of some of the industries within different provinces. So, like, for example, in Western Cape, we see agriculture declining, manufacturing also declining, and employment in finance and trade also declining. And if we look at other provinces like KwaZulu-Natal, which created about 38,000 jobs, these jobs were mainly in the community and social services industry as well as trade. And like for Free State, for example, which saw a decline in total employment, the main contributor to this decline were in the community and social services, private households, as well as agriculture.
Okay.
So all in all, different industries in different provinces contributed to either a decline or an increase in employment.
Now, in terms of those that have mostly been affected by the unemployment, I understand that women are the mostly affected.
Yes. Women are mostly affected. I would say that they are the most vulnerable in the labor market. Now, in the second quarter of 2023, unemployment for women increased from it was when we compare it with that one of men, we see that we have more women that are unemployed than women. However, if we look at employment, we see that we have more men that are employed than women, and we have more women that are discouraged than what we have when we look at the men. Now, in terms of participation in the labor force, about 54.3% of women of working age participate in the labor force. This is compared to 64.9% of men that participate in the labor force. And if we look at the unemployment rate during the second quarter of 2022, we saw that unemployment rate for women, it has been basically higher than that for men if we take it about 10 years back. And it has increased from 27.5% in the second quarter of 2013, that is 10 years ago, to 35.7% in the current quarter. It is standing at 35.7% for women and 30% for males.
Okay. And just to break down then to the youth, generally, when you look at the youth?
Yes, I would say like women, youth are also vulnerable in the labor market. And in the second quarter, the youth unemployment rate, I'm talking about the youth 15 to 34 years, their unemployment rate was standing at 45.3%. And if you look at the youth in the two categories of 15 to 24 as well as 25 to 34, you see their unemployment rate being the highest when you compare with the other age groups. For the 15 to 24 years, we are looking at 60.7%. And those that are 25 to 34 years, we are looking at the unemployment rate of 39.8%. And they have the unemployment rate, which is way higher than all other age groups. However, when you look at their absorption rate, that is the proportion of those that are in the working age population that are employed, the youth have the lowest absorption rate, and they also have the lowest participation rate, that is participation rate in the labor force.
Okay,
yes.
All right. Thank you very much for your time. Good evening to you.
Thank you very much, sir. Good
evening. That is, there's Rimana Mela there from Statistics South Africa, so looking at the stats as they came out. And as you would know, Statistics South Africa so generally do not necessarily analyze the meaning of the data. They collect data and they supply. The government uses the data. Mr. Miyelani Holeni does the analyzing of the implications and the meaning of the data. Is an economist attached to Ndiso Consulting and is joining us on the line to speak to us about the unemployment figures that we got today. Mr. Holeni, good evening and welcome.
Good evening and very good evening to the listeners. I hope all is well.
All is well. Thank you very much. We appreciate your time. So a 0.3% decrease in the unemployment figures. What is your overall takeaway from that?
Well, I think it's the right direction, certainly, in terms of the decrease. But it's nearly not sufficient to point to the job creation that is so desperately required in the economy. But as we understand that the economy has been sluggish for quite some time, the recovery from COVID still has not sunk into the economy. The sectors that should be creating jobs as well are not creating jobs at the rate that they should. And as you will appreciate, if the formal sector versus the informal sector, if the formal sector is the one that creates more jobs, it means the absorption rate of semi-skilled and unskilled personnel is very low. So I think from where we are, we note at least a decrease in unemployment. However, it needs to have at least been greater than the margins that we have seen.
Because as you talk about that, maybe let's go to one other facet of it. It's the expanded definition of unemployment. How should we interpret that against what you're saying in the expectation that it should perhaps be a bigger margin to make a dent on the high levels of unemployment in the country?
Yeah, I think firstly to look at the composite number as we see it, which is above 30%. In other economies, this constitutes a crisis, but somehow in our economy, it seems to have normalized. And if it goes up, even by basis points or percentages, it seems that this is the normal range. So the expanded definition, as we should always understand it, is that it looks much broader and even looks at, those people that, are seeking jobs, whereas, others, have given up. Others, are, in the job market, whatever the case may be. So in the expanded definition of unemployment, we have a worse, a number that we are seeing, which encompasses everyone who is eligible to be economically active and to be in the job market. However, they are not in the main fold seeking, or they have given up, or for whatever reason they are not participating or have elected, to look at other alternatives as opposed to seeking employment. So actually, the unemployment in South Africa then is higher in proportion than what we are always hearing. And this is a scary thought, because if you understand the population of South Africa, according to the latest census, to be about 50 million, the number of people that, are working, and all the categories as were described, and of course, the worst hit categories of, young people. And young people are the ones who are often semi-skilled and some of them unskilled because purely because of their age. And if the informal sector is not creating the jobs that would absorb them, then it means that, we even have quite a greater pandemonium in terms of the unemployment in the economy.
Yeah, because when you were talking about the population, and I'll come back to that, the youth and women are the mostly affected. But when you were talking about the population, so they are saying 16.3 million people are working. Pre-COVID, it was 16.4 million people that were working. What are we saying around that? And vis-a-vis the issue you were raising around the population of the country and the people that should be able to work in the country.
So in essence, if we then understand the fact that the 16.4 million, and we make an assumption which perhaps is a gross assumption that each one of those people contribute to the tax, into the fiscus in terms of, the taxes in one way or the other. So it means 16.4 of those 16.4 million are carrying essentially the entire country from a contribution to the fiscus, to the budget, and to the amenities, the services, and all of those things that, perhaps, would be apportioned as to be used by various people within the economy. So in other words, for one, each person that is working, that person is possibly supporting 2 to 3 people that should be contributing themselves, but they are being supported by one person. So one person working possibly supports about 3 people within the economy. That is the statistic that if we want to understand population versus unemployment versus the contribution to the fiscus in the form of taxation and other duties and so on. So that is the proportion that, we are sitting with. So as that number fluctuates of unemployment, increases, it means that, one person has to support more people in terms of their taxes and to take care of the medical health, the transportation, infrastructure, and all of those things that eventually form the budget.
As you were saying that we keep saying pre-COVID times. So it's almost at pre-COVID times. So this 16.4 million was pre-COVID times. But you said in other economies, it would be a crisis to be above 30%. For some reason, it's not necessarily in the way we're handling it in our country. But then it suggests even pre-COVID, we had a very serious unemployment. In your, if I take your statement as it were, in that same vein, we had very serious unemployment crisis in the country.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think if we then take the pre and the post, it's important that we understand that the pre the economy is supposed to have been booming. However, it was not merely operating at the levels that an economy such as ours should, because at some stage is that our economy should be growing at least 3.5% to about 5% bracket. To be able to absorb a lot more people, to keep people employed, to make sure that the taxes are paid, and the expansion of the budget, and so on and so forth. So if you then have that fall off in terms of COVID and the recovery that has to come through, it becomes a daunting task for the economy to find itself. And it's purely because of the structure of our economy, which has over-concentration of certain sectors. For instance, the jobs that have been created are only being created in the main within the formal sector, of which the formal sector regularly retrenches and employs and retrenches and employs. And as soon as they retrench, they don't employ nearly the same number of people who should be employed. So if we understand the crisis that we sit with in terms of unemployment of 32.6%, you compare it perhaps to the unemployment rate in the USA, which is 3.6%. And if you're talking about the likes of the USA, their population is almost 6 times that of South Africa. So you can imagine 3.6% of the population unemployed, vis-a-vis 32.6% in South Africa with a smaller population. So you can understand that a greater proportion of people within the developed world of the USA, which is about, I think their population now is at around 330 million, and a 3.6% unemployment, vis-a-vis 55 million, 32.6%. So if you want to understand the issue of the crisis and how the unemployment is impacting on our economy and the lack of development, those are the numbers that we can peg alongside. Of course, the comparison may be unfair because we are talking about, a developed and a developing economy.
Right. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Holeni. As always, appreciate your time.
Thank you very much.
Terrific. That is Mr. Miyelani Holeni there, unpacking that for us, helping us understand as we look at those stats there that came out from Statistics South Africa, unemployment, where we are, and so on. Okay, so let's speak to